Afternoon, everybody. It has been again a couple of weeks since the last time I did a video, so I thought I would go ahead and knock one out today. I've got some free time on my hands, thought I'd spend it with you. Today, instead of going through a chapter of a book, because again, right now there's plenty of physical work to be done. In fact, I should be in Louisville today building frames and getting ready. Had some car issues. Hey, Becky. Short pop, long pop, any pop is good. Hey, look, by the way, speaking of you, keeping my coffee hot all day long. But anyway, so I should be in Louisville, would like to be in Louisville, would rather be in Louisville, putting some frames together to get ready for spring, but I am having car issues. So I'm really excited about that because there is nothing more awesome than, you know, going to crank your car and nothing happens. So anyway, since that's not going to happen today, I decided I would go ahead and do some more talking on some things that I've been reading about honeybees, because if I have learned anything about keeping bees, it is that I don't know enough about keeping bees. So we're always trying to research, we're always trying to do more, learn more. And in that pursuit, my dad researches all the time. He is, yeah, loads of sarcasm. But he's researching all the time. He's reading, he's watching videos. Actually, he's texting me right now. My eyes keep darting up to the top of my screen. Dad, you'll understand hopefully when you watch this video, but I will respond to you in a little while. Hi, Anna. So anyway, so we're trying to watch and read and learn all the time. We've got a couple of webinars that we're going to. I actually just downloaded Zoom on my phone. For those of you who have had it forever and you're like, well, why don't you have Zoom? I've never needed it. Now I need it, so I have it. So there, I joined the 19th century. So got that downloaded though. We've got a couple of webinars coming up. Really excited about those. And but that's not what we're going to be talking about today. That's just part of the pursuit of knowledge. And what we're going to talk about today is, you know, you've heard me reference a couple of times what we call super DFM. It's just a direct feed microbial. So it's the white powdery substance that you've seen us use at the hives leading up to winter when we're sprinkling it across the top, trying to get it down in there. I'm lifting up the supers and then Dad does the sprinkling and all that kind of fun stuff. That's what I'm talking about. That is a microbial that gets into the bee's digestive system and helps them digest better, helps them get more from their diet. And to be perfectly honest with you, while I completely trust my dad's judgment, because again, he did the initial research, he looked into everything and decided, you know what, this stuff is good. This stuff is good for us. It's good for our bees. So we want to do this. Okay, cool. I'm sold. Let's do that. But I had some questions. And so I decided, let's go to the source. And so I got him to send me the website. I've got the website. I've pulled it up, and I've been doing some reading. I got really excited. I just thought I was going to read some advertising stuff about this Super DFM. It's called Super DFM plus P801. And that plus P801 is new from the stuff that we've been purchasing in the past. This is actually an even better product, and we're going to get into why, because it's actually really kind of exciting for me. So I just thought I was going to come in and read some advertisements, and, you know, like for instance, it stimulates immunity and detoxification. It supports gut health and digestion, and there is no resistance buildup, which is neat. I mean, you know, for ourselves, for instance, you know, you have to take a medication. You can, in some cases, if you have to take medication for a certain period or a longer period of time, oh, I don't need my screen to. If you take it for longer periods of time, you can build up resistances. So they're having to up your dosages, or they're having to change the medication, that sort of thing. This doesn't have that side effect. We don't have to worry about the bees building up a resistance to these microbials. It helps their digestive system. End of story. So that's actually pretty exciting. But it wasn't just an advertising and ordering website. I got in here, and there's actually a couple of different research studies that have been done. One, you're going to make this product. Why are you going to make this product? What's the purpose? What's the demand for that product, right? And so one of them is, let's see, it's the Honeybee exposure to pesticides. And they did a 4-year nationwide study on honeybee exposure to pesticides. And, people ask me all the time. People ask me all the time about people use different languages, but the fall of the honeybee, or honeybees dying off, the colony collapse syndrome, all of these different things. They ask me about that all the time. So folks like you are genuinely concerned about whether or not bees are going to survive. Well, turns out these folks are concerned about it too. So they've done some pretty extensive research. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the honeybee exposure to pesticides, this 4-year study that they did, because I think it's freaking neat. All right. And then they determined through this, I'm going to skip to the end, spoilers, just so you know, they determined that honeybees are dreadfully exposed to, they didn't use that language, but they are dreadfully exposed to pesticides. And pesticides, the thing about that is the pesticides being used on crops aren't necessarily designed to... Sorry, my sister-in-law just responded to me too. Oh, okay. So, but the pesticides aren't necessarily designed to kill the honeybee. Yay. And so that's the company's defense of themselves is, well, it's not designed to harm the honeybee, so it's not killing the honeybee. And they've done their own research. I've actually read that too. These pesticide companies have done their own research, and they said, see, look, the bee has touched it and she hasn't died. So yay us, we won. Well, what we're learning is, I say we because I want to be included in that, but I don't actually want to do all the research because this stuff is intense, man. But what we're learning is that these bees are getting into this stuff that's not designed to kill them per se, and it's having less than lethal, but the exposure is in fact ending up killing them. It doesn't kill them now, it kills them once they've gotten all the way back to the hive and they have now exposed the rest of their colony. But it doesn't do it immediately, so they keep going back to the source where they're getting this pesticide, and they're recruiting other bees to go and get from this area. And so now they are bringing it. There's a chair right there, and my ring and finger just found it. Anyway, so they're bringing this back to the hive, and then because bees are very efficient in gathering, now everybody in the hive is exposed to this pesticide, and one day the unsuspecting beekeeper comes to his or her bee yard and finds dead colonies with no explanation as to why. I watched a video, I think it was Anna, actually. Yeah, Anna, you and I talked several months ago now about a gentleman who came up, and it was some 10 grand worth of bees and material that he lost. He walks up, and he had lost 2 apiaries, 2 of his bee yards, and another beekeeper that he knew nearby had also lost a bee yard. They came in, and they just had hundreds of thousands of bees dead on the ground in front of the hives. And that's all pesticide. These bees are taking it. Now, I think in that particular case, somebody had actually dusted across the bee yards specifically, and so it was actually direct contact, and it was a very lethal dose. I don't remember off the top of my head, but I believe that was the case. But it happens all the time. These, and people are using these pesticides on these crops, and we're using monofloral crops. Hey, Christina. Christina, I'm going to be sending you a message in a little while to ask you about the birthday party tomorrow. I think all 3 of us are coming, so I'm pretty excited about that, but I'll send you a message in just a little while. Anyway, sorry guys. So these pesticides, it's a serious threat. People are asking me, what can we do? What can we do? How can we help? How can we help? Well, stop using pesticides if you use pesticides. There are other natural ways to take care of the pests that you might be dealing with. Now, I know none of you guys are like large-scale farmers. You don't have, hundreds of acres of corn or cotton or whatever the case is out there that you're spraying for. I get that. But we all have our home gardens. It seems convenient. Oh, shoot, I have aphids. I'm going to run down to Lowe's and grab a pesticide for that, and I'm going to kill these aphids. You could actually just get ladybug eggs and let the ladybug eggs hatch in your garden. And the reason I say the eggs is because you may not know this, but ladybugs actually return to the place that they hatched in order to lay their eggs. So if you just buy ladybugs and you release them, well, that's great. You've got them for a little bit, but then they leave. And they go wherever they hatched from, and if they can find it, and they lay their eggs. If you get the eggs, they hatch there. You see what I'm talking about? You continue to have ladybugs, and you continue to be able to combat those aphids. You have moles in your yard. Cool. Deal with the grub worms, because that's the food source for the mole. You don't even have to worry about dealing with the mole. Besides that, you got bigger problems on your hands with with grub worms than you do with the moles anyway. So you might as well deal with them, but don't do it with the pesticides. So there are other ways. Research that. That's how you can be helpful. That being said, this company has produced this Super DFM, the direct feed microbials, and so the research was, are they being exposed? Turns out, yes, they're being very much exposed. So the second research was, does this stuff work, and is it organic? We, for instance, pride ourselves as beekeepers on being what's called an organic beekeeper. Okay. In fact, last year, we had our hives inspected. We had a state inspector come through, and she actually looked. We went through each one of our hives, and she had her checklist, and she asked us a bunch of questions, and we had to be able to answer those questions. And she looked into the hives and determined that, of course, certified us as organic. Turns out we've just reached out to her today and asked her. Because to be perfectly honest with you, Dad and I were talking about it this morning, and I wasn't sure. Like, is the certification good for a year? Is it good for 2 years, 5 years? Whatever the case is. So we wanted to make sure that we're always on top of things. So she's coming out. As it stands right now, we're scheduled for the 28th of February, because it doesn't look like it's going to get warm enough in January. For the rest of January, it doesn't look like it'll get warm enough for us to open the hives. So we need to wait until a little later in the winter for a hopefully warm day. So as of right now, it's tentatively set for the 28th. So I'm really excited about that. She's a really nice lady. Name is Tammy Potter, in case any beekeepers happen to stumble across my video and you are in the Louisville, Kentucky area. She's the state apiarist, and she will, by appointment, she'll come out and take a look at your hives with you. She actually helped us catch a pretty big deal last year. Now, it was the first inspection of the year. Certainly believe we would have found it had we inspected it without her being there, but the fact that she was there, we inspected a little sooner in the year than we normally would have. So she actually helped us find a specific issue with a hive where we've talked about it a few times, where our queen had stopped laying fertilized eggs. And so we were able to correct the issue before we lost everything in that hive. So we actually were able to strengthen other hives. We lost that particular queen, but we were able to use that material. So that's actually, it's pretty wise to have yourself an apiarist, state apiarist, come out and check your bees with you. Okay. So that being said, I'm really actually kind of excited about that. But let's talk about the research here. First off, let's talk about the DFM for a little bit. If I can bring that one up again. Yeah. I had the right one up the first time. Okay, so this determines that there are high levels of the miticides and agrochemicals, but just pesticides. Pesticides, fertilizers, that sort of thing are the agrochemicals that they're talking about there. It's just agricultural, chemicals that are used in agriculture. And a lot of times that's going to be your pesticides, your fertilizers, your they've got miticides in here as well, that sort of thing. That's in there. In fact, I want to give full credit here. The website, by the way, guys, is strongmicrobials.com. I can actually put that in the comments section if you are motivated to go to the website and actually read these scientific articles. Feel free, but it's strongmicrobials.com. That's the reason I'm going to put it in the comments section, is because I can't speak, apparently. Microbials is not a hard word, yet I've stumbled over it twice now. Strongmicrobials.com. There, I got through it. And they're both there. And the thing about it is, this company doesn't just focus on bees. They actually develop these microbials for freaking cows, and you name it. If it's on a farm, they've got microbials for it. And we just happen to be interested in the bees, obviously, for obvious reasons. So one of the big questions that I had, because I told you that the reason I even came to this website to begin with, or got the website from my dad to begin with, was because I had some questions. And he and I could have sat there and talked about it all day. Most of my questions, he would have ended up having to come back and read this stuff anyway, so we agreed that one of us needs to read it. He wasn't interested in it, so that falls on me. And actually, I'm kind of excited about it. So one of my questions, though, is this stuff organic? Because in order for us to be certified as organic beekeepers, we can't apply chemicals to our bees. We don't want to anyway. Other research, other studies out there have come to find that when you use these chemicals on the bees become dependent on those chemicals. I don't know about addicted, but they become dependent on them. Their bodies get used to having them, and thus they become, in effect, weaker. Well, we don't want that. We want strong bees. So we only want to use what's natural for them to help them get stronger, so that they are the best that they could possibly be, and we are providing the best for them that we could possibly provide. I think the 80s, 90s, somewhere along that line, everybody's like, oh, you gotta, treat them, and that's gonna get rid of all of these, because we had all these new parasites and other deadly things for the bees that were coming into the U.S. that we had never had before. Varroa mite, foul brood, that sort of. It was all coming in. And it's like, what the hell do we do? Well, let's throw a bunch of chemicals at them. Well, it actually weakened them, and before you know it, colony collapse disorder comes along, and bees are just dying left and right, and the apocalypse is upon us, and the world is going to lose a third of its food, fruit and vegetables, because the bees are not going to be here anymore, and we're all going to die, and it's going to be mass chaos. And then the guy decides, in Europe, he decides, you know what, I'm going to test this out. And I'm sorry, I don't remember the gentleman's name. It's in one of these books that I've read. But he decides he's going to test this out, and he offers to the beekeepers in the area, he offers a penny per Varroa mite. If you can bring me a live Varroa mite, I will pay you a penny per. Ended up costing him quite a bit. And then this guy goes out to his hives, thump, he just dumps the Varroa mites on his hives. Now, he expected tremendous, and he got it, tremendous loss. I think he lost some 80% of his hives, maybe 70, 75. But I mean, it was huge loss. And that sucks. But he kept 30% of them. We'll say 20% of them even. He kept them. Those bees had something special about them. They had, whether it was an immunity to the Varroa mite or not, but they had qualities about them that made them better at defending against the varroa mite. So he started researching those survivors, right? And before you know it, he had bred a varroa-resistant honeybee. The leg biters, actually, that we talked about, we've got them in our bee yards because we want to breed that quality into our bees. Because the varroa mite sucks, and so we've got that. So anyway, that's kind of neat research, and so these are the steps that are being taken towards, you know, the survivability of the bees. The way you can help is, if you garden, don't be using pesticides. Take the time, research a little longer, find the natural or organic ways to protect your plants and vegetables. I mean, shoot, you're eating that stuff anyway. I mean, you're dumping chemicals into your ground. Your plants are sucking that up. They're keeping the pests off. That's great. But now you're turning around and eating the chemical. So that's exciting, right? Can't wait for the next round of Roundup. I should have used a different herbicide. But anyway, so here are the two studies. Let's look into the high levels of miticides and agrochemicals in North American apiaries. I am not going to read this stuff to you. If you've ever read a scientific paper, if you've ever read one of these research papers, as Yoda says, page turners, they are not. So a couple of highlights that I've taken from it. Strong, let's see, this is approved for organic production, because again, that was one of my questions. Hey, look, are we still going to be able to call ourselves organic beekeepers? We have organic honey if we're using this stuff. It turns out that yes, these microbials are living things. Think of like yogurt. People eat yogurt for their digestive system. It's the same thing. It's the same concept anyway. There are microbials in the yogurt that help your digestive system. So eating that yogurt helps you be a healthier you. Well, it's the same thing. This is just yogurt for honeybees, right? Let's see. It is partnered with the Certified Naturally Grown (C&G) organization. They offer the C&G offers peer review certification. Peer review is basically somebody who is not your company comes along and performs tests on the product, because while you say, yeah, this stuff is great, I designed it, I've developed it, I want to market it, and I've tested it myself. We did an internal investigation and we found that everything is kosher. These guys come along and say, yeah, we don't have a dog in this fight, so we're going to test it to make sure that it is in fact useful and what you claim it is. So these guys do the peer reviews for this material, for this probiotic, for the DFM, right? And they do this for the certification for farmers and beekeepers who produce food without relying on synthetic chemicals or GMOs. So I have to admit, while I know GMO equals bad, I didn't necessarily know what GMO stood for. It's like when I first got into the military, the Air Force, everybody was using acronyms. I was like, what the hell are you saying? I don't understand. There's a Danny DeVito movie. I can't remember the name of the movie. If somebody can remember it, pop it up here on my screen for me. But he became a teacher for some ne'er-do-well soldiers. And he first shows up on the base. Hey, honey. I love you too. She was talking to me, by the way. She might like all of you, but she definitely loves me. She has to. That poor woman lives with me. She puts up with me. Oh, gosh. Anyway, we won't get into that. Y'all pray for her, though. Okay? Anyway, if you can remember the name of the movie, Danny DeVito, it's a really good movie. I wish I could remember the name of it. But he shows up on base, and he's like, hey, I'm looking for such and such. And they're like, oh, yeah, you take a left at the DF2, and they throw out all these acronyms at him. He's like, what the And anyway, into the movie, somebody asks him for directions, and he throws out the same list. So I don't know acronyms. I don't do acronyms very well. I didn't know what GMO stood for. I made the assumption that you didn't know what GMO stood for, and so I looked it up. It's a genetically modified organisms. Once I looked it up and I read that, I thought, well, shit, I know that. I knew that. And so I did know it. I just I never thought of it, so it didn't pop up to my brain. But whatever. Anyway, so now you know genetically modified organisms. Okay? And so genetically modified plants, genetically modified chickens. I mean, you know those things actually used to fly? Chickens did? Yeah. Anyway, so I wanted to know, can we use this bees and still be considered organic? And so the direct-fed microbials are live. They're beneficial bacteria. And so that's kind of what this study concluded. But here's the neat thing. The products are manufactured right here in the United States, right? So that's pretty awesome. They're certified in the American Feed Industries Association Safe Feed, Safe Food program. The certification program ensures that products exceed all of the United States FDA requirements. And for those of you that don't know, FDA just stands for yay, more big government. Let's see. Anyway, sorry. Peer-reviewed study. So here's some of the stuff that they found. Mortality rates decreased in beehives. Decreased from 41% mortality rate. So basically 41% of the bees died in the bees that were being studied specifically for this research project. 41%. They had a reduction to 15% mortality. According to this USDA survey, some 98% of the honeybee comb and wax foundation in North America are contaminated with, I misspelled that word apparently, and I just realized it now as I was reading it. And so contaminated with pesticides. With an average of 6 different pesticides per sample. That is huge. 98% of the bees that were tested. 98% of them. And we don't know where that 2% came from. Maybe they were new, maybe that was newly established comb. So they're counting it as they put the wax in there. They're like, well, let's go ahead and test this and see if it has any pesticides on it. Turns out it doesn't. Well, we tested it. We need to include it in the study. I don't know that. I don't know where that 2% comes from, but 98% of the wax in the beehives had tested positive for pesticides. And there was an average of 6 different pesticides per sample. That is insane. That's crazy. These bees are walking around on those pesticides. They're laying their eggs. The eggs are developing in those pesticides. That is insane. And so, beekeepers are like, why are we struggling all the time to keep these, be able to raise these damn bees? We are the problem. People are the problem. High levels of miticide, agrochemicals, in North American apiaries, implications for honeybee health. Let's see. And then I just wrote the researcher's name. So they did this study. They determined that these bees are heavily exposed to pesticides. Now, this wasn't a what can we do about it research. It's a is there an it research. And so, 1/3 of the bee colonies in the U.S. were lost during each of the last 3 winters between 2006 and 2009. Now this, by the way, this obviously was about a decade ago when this research was done. Frankly, yes, it has gotten better in the last decade because of research like this. And this isn't the only project that I've read about. Actually, I've referenced a couple of them in just this Facebook Live feed. So this isn't the only research project going on, but because of these research projects, people are more aware, and we now have lobbyists in DC who have lobbied to Congress on behalf of the bees and on behalf of the beekeepers, because something's got to be done. There's got to be some regulation. Since we got this big government, we might as well put it to some kind of positive use, if that's not an oxymoron, that we try to get some sort of benefit. And so, regulate how these pesticides are being tested and utilized, something to that nature. So there's a lot of work going on there. This determined that we were losing a third of our bees up to 2009. Okay. Overwintering, along with other losses of the primary pollinator. Let's see. And I'm not going to read all of this, so I apologize for skimming through. Colony collapse was characterized by a rapid loss of adult bee, but not the queen or the brood, along with the absence of invasive responsive by robber bees and other hive pests. So what's going on, what they're determining, this colony collapse that we're talking about, what they determined was the bees that are home are basically just starving to death because there aren't any more foragers, because they're dying somewhere else because of exposure to these pesticides, right? So this colony collapse disorder basically caused mass absenteeism and starvation inside the hive. Absenteeism from the flying bees and starvation on behalf of the bees that aren't able to get out and fly. And the queen, she's not going to. She's stuck laying eggs all day. She's not a gatherer anymore. Like she lost that potential once they put her in the queen cell and started feeding her just royal jelly. She's not a gatherer anymore. So these bees were starving out. So this research, really fun stuff, and it doesn't give me pages, but most of it's like charts and all that other kind of stuff. Volume 5. This thing is extensive. So let's see. This says bees generally have lower pesticide residue than pollen. Oh, and that was the other thing that they found, was that a lot of these pesticides are getting into the hive through the pollen and through the nectar. So it wasn't just the bees going out and landing on the flower and they've got contact with the pesticide. They're actually, it's in the food source, which is what I was talking about earlier, about not using pesticides and herbicides and miticides in your personal gardens, because your plants are actually soaking that stuff into them. That's how these pesticides work. Most of them, or at least a lot of them anyway. Some of them are contact. You spray them out there. My wife hates ants, and so she's like walking around the house on an ant hunt. So that's all contact stuff. But then when our pest control company comes out every month, they will, we tell them, okay, look, we saw ants in these areas. They'll put out bait. That stuff goes back to the hive, gets into the food source of the ants, and then gets distributed through the food to the ants inside that colony. And that's how they get the queen. You get the queen, you get the whole colony, right? As long as they can't develop another queen like, bees would do, if they can. Okay, so there are different ways that these pesticides work, and one of them is, and I apologize for honestly forgetting the terminology, but this stuff is absorbed. It's brought in with the water source for the plant, and I was going to say with the food, but they produce their own. That's how plants work. But so because they soak the stuff up through the ground, they get it into it's in the plant now, and as the plant produces its pollen, produces its nectar, that pesticide is included in that process. The bees come in, they gather that up, they take it back to the hive, and everybody eats that shit. So this Super DFM, the +P801, the Super DFM are the microbials that help with digestion. Okay, so that actually just helps the bees get more out of their nutrition, out of their food source. The +801 is where stuff gets really exciting, because that product reduces the and I don't know how it actually works. I haven't gotten that far into these articles yet, but it reduces the chemicals. It reduces the pesticides. It breaks them down. and thus it reduces the effect. That's where we were talking about the 41% down to 15% mortality with the bees. Let's get over here to this honeybee exposure to pesticides, because this is the one that I've actually been reading. The other one I was reading and then realized I wasn't on the right article. That wasn't like, I'm reading this thing and it's, wait, this isn't what I read yesterday. What's going on here? So this is weird. And so I continued to read it because I thought, oh, whatever. It's a scientific article. Maybe I was confused. No, turns out there were two of them. And so this one, though, the honeybee exposure to pesticides, 4-year nationwide study. Give you a real quick synopsis if I can get my computer to stop messing with me here. This was done out of the Department of Entomology and Center for Pollinator Research, the Pennsylvania State University in Pennsylvania. In case you didn't know where the University of Pennsylvania was. Here's your abstract. Pollinators, including honeybees, are responsible for the successful reproduction of more than 87% of flowering plant species. So pollinators as a whole, including honeybees, because you hear people talk about the 33% of the honeybees. Yeah. Honeybees are responsible for 33%, but pollinators overall. So the honeybees aren't the only things being exposed and affected by these pesticides. Pollinators are being affected. I only talk about the honeybees because the honeybees is the thing that I focus on. That's what I do. But there are other pollinators out there. They are responsible for more than 87% of flowering plant species, the reproduction of. Okay? They are thus vital to the ecosystem, health, and agricultural services worldwide. To investigate honeybee exposure to pesticides, 168 pollen samples and 142 wax comb samples were collected from the colonies within 6 stationary apiaries in 6 U.S. states. Oh, scrolled way too far. My computer doesn't like me. But in my defense, God created the heavens and the earth and the land and the water and the sky and the light and the dark, and he created all those things, molded man, created woman, all that kind of stuff. Hey, Jenny. And then he used this particular laptop to check his email when he was done with that. Like, he rested on day 7. Yeah, so he just sat down, he checked his Facebook, watched some YouTube and all that kind of stuff on this same laptop. So yeah, it doesn't like me, but it's old and cantankerous and doesn't like anybody. So, I don't feel too bad. Let's see. These samples. I think I'm hysterical, and y'all keep watching me, which only tells me that I'm funny. So this is all really your fault. Don't stop watching my video. Let's see. Samples were analyzed for evidence of pesticides. Samples were taken bi-weekly, and when each colony was active. Each apiary included 30 colonies. 5 of those 30 in each apiary were chosen, and that's where the samples were taken from. All right, so long short of it, because I'm not going to, this is a huge ass paragraph. I've been trying so hard not to cuss. Anyway, this is a huge paragraph. And so what they did is, in that particular bee yard, they took the sample of 5. They mixed that up, and then they added their chemicals. They did their, thank you, Jenny. They did the centrifugal force. They mixed all of that stuff up, and then they did their tests on it. Okay, so that's the long short of it. Apparently I had an alarm set for 1:30. My bad. Let's see. 10 different modes of action were found across all 4 years. 9 additional modes of action. Let's see, I think I might have skipped too far. Here we go. This is what I was looking for. A total of 91 different compounds were detected. Of these, 79 different pesticides and metabolites were observed in the pollen. 56 were observed in the wax. In all years, insecticides were detected more frequently than were fungicides, or fungicides, however you want to pronounce that, or herbicides. We'll read that again. In all years, insecticides were detected more frequently than were fungicides or herbicides. 1/3 of the detected pesticides were found only in pollen. Let's see, the mean, so the standard deviation number of detections per pooled pollen sample varied by location from 1.1 to 8.7 for those of you who are into the specifics of it. 10 different modes of action. Let's see. Yeah. I've been struggling over some simple words. That sentence got really intense, so I'm actually just going to skip it because some of those words look like they were going to kick my butt. Okay, so now they do admit here in this last sentence because only pooled pollen samples were obtained, so they didn't actually do specific to like this colony, this wax, this colony, this wax. They actually pulled all that together from the 5 hives that they sampled, and they only did that. They did that per year, but they are admitting that more data is needed to adequately evaluate the differences in pesticide exposure risk to honeybees among the individual colonies. Okay, so this is a broad span experiment that they were doing. Okay, and so they do admit that. However, let's face it, our bee yards, it's reasonable to expect that the bees that are here in this apiary are to some degree kind of crossing over each other in their gathering. So by that, it's reasonable to assume that if you're near this giant cornfield and you got 10 beehives, some of the bees from that beehive are going into that cornfield, or whatever the case is, apple orchard, whatever it is. It doesn't matter what the flower is. If there's a source available, it's reasonable to believe that the bees are going to that source. At least some of the bees are going to that source. Okay, so that's kind of that was the motivation for why they did the experiment the way that they did the experiment. They are looking for, are pesticides present in beehives? The answer is yes. It's not, are pesticides present in every single beehive in the United States? That's an undertaking that is just far too massive. So for the scope that they were trying to to approach here, they kept it within that scope. Okay. Let's see. That's a repeat of the same sentence. A variety of different stressors, including pathogens, parasites, floral resource loss, environmental stresses, and socioeconomic factors have been suggested as contributing to the elevated levels of bee population decline. So that sentence basically is talking about the fact that there are a lot of stressors, a lot of reasons or beliefs as to why at this time, 2006, 2009, between 06 and 09, why we were losing so many bees. People were talking about cell phone towers. Maybe that's true. I don't know that talking to my mom is personally like bad for the bees, but people will believe anything. So I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. Okay, cool. That's happened before. It actually has. Like it was a Wednesday. I was wrong. Anyway, parasites, floral resources, that sort of floral resource loss. So floral resource loss is just the plant's not there anymore. The bees were there for cotton, and this year it's lima beans or whatever. So, crop rotation and all that kind of stuff. You also have to remember that the way we farm, we as Americans farm, I don't know what they do in other countries, so I don't speak for them, but the way that we farm with these massive just corn and massive just apples and massive just beans and massive just whatever the plant is that you're farming, the way that we farm is not natural. You don't go anywhere in nature and find these plants occurring in rows. And you certainly don't find it occurring for acre upon acre upon acre. You know, so that's not a natural way for farming to take place. Once upon a time, people used to, I like apples. I don't, but we're just this hypothetical individual that we're talking. I don't mind apples. I just don't. They're not on my list of things like, ooh, I want to eat a whatever. Apple's not it. But they say an apple a day, keeps the doctor away. You've heard that. Turns out, if you've only got the one apple, once you've thrown it, you're actually out of ammo. So you'll need a bag of them if you want to keep doctor. So anyway, so the way that we farm isn't natural. It doesn't do the bees any good, because that's called monofloral. It's a monofloral diet for them. You've heard me reference that before in previous videos. And so the bees go out and they only get this. I live in Indiana, by the way, and so there are cornfields everywhere you look. I don't even live like next to a cornfield, but I can step out of my door and throw a stone in any direction and probably hit corn. It's everywhere. So if I say corn, I know that's not the only thing that we grow in the U.S., but it is the only thing that we seem to grow here in Indiana. So, you put your bees out next to this cornfield, and they pollinate that corn. There are people that actually, I'm listening to a webinar of this guy as a commercial beekeeper, and that's what he does. He actually takes his bees and moves them from location to location to location, pollinating these crops, which is great for the farmer. That particular beekeeper, if you're a pollinator, you're not trying to produce honey. You're trying to pollinate those crops. Those crops. You're just pollinating those crops. And so the farmer pays you to bring your bees to his or her farm, and that's how you make your money. You're not trying to do honey sales. You may make some honey, and you can sell that as a staple, but that's not your moneymaker. Your moneymaker is actually the service of pollination. And so, but it's monofloral. And basically what some of these other research projects, not this specific one here, because it was not within the scope of what was being researched, but what they found was that the bees are basically becoming anemic. It's us, for instance, just trying to survive on a diet of broccoli or corn because we're in Indiana. You can't do it. Your body needs nutrients, and those nutrients come from multiple sources, each source providing its own nutrients. Well, the same is true for honeybees, and the same is the nutrient provided is different per pollen source. And you've seen us, we've held up the frames before. Oh yeah, look, this is my frame. Use your imagination. All right, but you've seen us hold up the frames before, and you see browns and yellows and whites and golds and greens in some cases, different pollen colors. All of those is a different protein source, and that's where they're getting their protein, is from the pollen. And so each of those protein sources provides different nutrition. Okay, so in that way, the bees are not anemic. I think I just traced a rabbit trail because I'm not exactly sure why I walked down that. But floral resource loss, there you go. That's what we're talking about. Floral resource loss. What happens when that's not being planted this year, right? Environmental stresses. Honestly, that could just be winter. That could be drought. That could be any number of things that are just naturally occurring that we don't have any control over. But our environment isn't necessarily just nature made either. So there are other considerations. One of the, for instance, as environments go, one of the recent surprises in recent years has been the success of urban beekeeping. People living in cities will put like a beehive at the top of their apartment building or something, and you think, oh, it's a freaking city. What are you going to get? They've been hugely successful. Now you're only going to get the 1 or 2 beehives, and I guess you kind of hope nobody knows that you have a beehive up there. But they've been really kind of successful. So that's one of the environmental considerations as well. Let's see. And then socioeconomic factors. We've purchased product from bees in the past. Not from bees, from beekeepers in the past. Their status changed and they weren't able to keep up with. Beekeeping is expensive. It's just pure and simple. I mean, there are ways. Yeah, you cut your costs and all that kind of stuff. We're looking forward to being able to produce honey this year, so we're going to sell some of that honey and we're going to be able to, cut some of our costs, maybe profit a little bit, but we'll see. But beekeeping is expensive, and so things change, and it's dreadful to think about. But from time to time, beekeepers like, I can't do this anymore. Kills the bees. Hopefully sells them off. Hopefully doesn't give them away. But there's plenty of other options. But anyway, things change. Early 80s, primary, if not exclusive, exposure to pesticides experienced by honeybees. The source of hive product contamination was from pesticides applied to agricultural or horticultural landscapes. With the introduction 3 decades ago. So yeah, it was. The varroa mite was why everybody's like, oh shoot, no, we've got to start throwing these chemicals on. This is what this paragraph goes on to talk about, so I'm not going to bother to read it to you. The varroa mite, some 30 years ago, well, that was 30 years ago when this was done. So, that was 2006 through 9. So, this study's being published in 2010, 2011. Here we are, 2021. So we're talking a decade ago. So we're talking 40 years ago that varroa first got introduced on U.S. soil and just kind of exploded. People flipped out and started throwing chemicals at their bees. And so that's what it's talking about, is up until this time, up until the 80s, most of the pesticide introduced into the hive was done from outside sources, coming from crops, gardens, that sort of thing. Then in the 80s, the varroa mite comes along and beekeepers are like throwing the pesticides directly onto the bees. Now, the varroa is a mite, and so these pesticides are designed it's a miticide. And so, you think, well, it's a miticide, that's the bee's an insect, the varroa is a mite, so we'll throw a miticide at them and the bee will be fine because she's not a mite. By that logic, you could drink Roundup and it will be fine because you're not a plant. But that was the logic behind miticides into the beehive, So anyway, it got pretty nasty. To date, studies of pesticide residue in honeybee colonies have been cross-sectional. Residues have been evaluated in a variety of matrices, including but not exclusive to honey, bee bread, pollen. Bee bread is the mixture of pollen and honey that they're feeding to the larva into themselves. Let's see, propolis. Propolis, we've talked about that in the past. That's the compound that they actually produce. They use tree sap and other materials, and they actually use that to seal up the cracks or holes in their hive or in their nest. And so obviously they're walking across it all the time, and so that's they sampled that as well. And then the bees themselves have the pesticides on them. Let's see. Oops, wrong button. Detected 121 different herbicides, fungicides, insecticides. 200. So this is further studies. 259 wax samples. 87 compounds were detected with a mean of 8 detections per sample. One sample contained residues of 39 compounds. 4 most frequently detected pesticides in wax were I shouldn't have read this in fluvalinate, cumifos. Anyway, some hard to read stuff is being found in here. Who comes up with these dang names? I know it's just a composite of the compounds that they use to make the pesticide, but seriously, call it green, call it red, call it something that is okay. Call it Roundup. I mean, you know, Roundup actually has its compound name as well, like I would assume. So anyway, this article, this paper goes into, you know, how they did their research, how they did their cross-examinations and all that other kind of stuff. Cross-examinations, like they took them to court. The cross-sectional and all that kind of stuff. So it just basically goes into how that is all done. And I'm hoping that I will come across. They did 3 trials in 2009, 2010, 2011, stationary hives. That's what we talked about with the 30 hives per apiary. It was 6 apiaries, 30 to 32 established. They started with 3-pound packages. Now, starting with packages, and this, I'm not knocking packages per se, but even the people who, you know, so for you beekeepers that come along and you sell packages, if you don't do it this way, cool. But you know as well as I do that there is something of a reputation when it comes to packages. So these commercial beekeepers, they take these bees around and they pollinate all these different, the migratory pollinators, right? They migrate all these different locations. They come back, those bees are just beaten down and worn out, and they take those, they shake them, they get a new queen, they throw her in there. Hopefully you get a new queen. They throw that queen in there, and then they sell this 3-pound package or 5-pound package or whatever the case is. These bees are just worn out, they're exhausted. So a package of bees is never going to be as good as a swarm of bees if you're trying to get started, okay? Now, collecting a swarm versus collecting a package are two different, totally different, wildly different procedures, right? So the package comes as this 4-sided wooden box and then screens on either of the 2 broadsides. There's a hole in the top. They put a can of feed down in there. They've got the queen in there as well, so that the bees, if in most cases she's not almost 100% of the cases, the queen that you get is not the queen that those bees are used to. So they've been given a new queen. They may or may not accept her. So she's in a queen box with a few attendant bees. They've got one end blocked off by cork and the other end blocked off by a candy. It's just candied, sugar. And the attendants will eat their way through that. They use that, of course, to produce food to feed the queen. And so that's your package, right? And so it's neat, contained, all that kind of fun stuff. The fun is when you get the bees, you get them to the hive, and you got to get them out of that box. You just shake this thing. The bees fall out. They are pissed. Most of the time, you're not going to get stung because they're also really confused. But it's an exciting day to introduce a new package. But they're old and they're exhausted in a vast majority of those cases. All right. A swarm, however, especially if you get an early season swarm, these are fresh bees. They've recently been flying. Just started flying. They've gathered so much that they've kind of filled the hive to capacity. They've done exactly what nature has designed them to do, which is fill the hive to capacity and split. All right. So you get that swarm. You're golden if you know what you're doing. You can, of course, be a brand new beekeeper. I read, I think it was 50 Years Among the Bees, which is a great read, by the way, if you're just interested. You know what? If you're just interested in bees, but you don't actually want to be a beekeeper, but there's something about the idea that's just fascinating to you, and you watch this video because you're just fascinated listening to somebody talk about the bees, read, oh, crud. Oh my gosh, I just blanked on the title. They made a movie about it. The 3 sisters. They take in this little girl. the sisters are named after the month. One of them is a little bit slow, and she like leads the roaches out of the house with sugar. I mean, I can tell you intimately the details about this book, but I cannot. Oh my God, the name is gone. Somebody pop this name up here. Y'all know what I'm talking about. So I've got some very well-read friends. Y'all have all read this book. I cannot believe May, August, June are the sisters' names. What is the name of this book? All right, whatever. Anyway, it's a great book, and unfortunately, I can't really remember the name of it now. They made a movie out of it. Same title. Oh, that's so frustrating. Stay young, for those of you who still are. Stay young, because it sucks. 50 Years Among the Bees is the book I started to talk about. He sees a swarm and decides that he wants to be a beekeeper. And of course, there's a little bit of a process to it for him, but he decides he wants to be a beekeeper. And this is, early 20th century. Decides he wants to be a beekeeper. He knows nothing about it, and sees this swarm, goes out and throws them into a pickle bucket. And now he's a beekeeper. That was his first hive, was a pickle bucket. And of course, so 50 Years Among the Bees, he starts with year one and walks you through the process of his learning process, the learning curve for becoming a beekeeper. In fact, in the winters, I don't remember where he lived, but in the wintertime, he brought his bees down into his wine cellar, into his cellar, because it was so cold outside. So he insulated them by bringing the bees inside. I can only imagine how it. But his wife, actually, I think it was his wife that gathered the first swarm. Now that I say that, I think she was the one that went and threw them into a pickle bucket, and he just started by helping her. Anyway, 50 Years Among the Bees is a great book. The name of the other book that I was just trying to think of is still not coming to me, and none of you are helping me with this. Thanks for that. All right. So what I'm going to do then, because it is a great book, I'm going to finish up with what I'm doing here as far as my video is concerned. I'm going to look that title up, and then I'll put it in the comments. Because it's a great read. And it's not specific about honeybees, by the way. It's not like about how to be a beekeeper. It's one of the sisters actually. The Secret Life of Bees! There it is! Thank you for all of you who did not help me remember the name of that book. The Secret Life of Bees is what it's called. It's a phenomenal book. Brought tears to my eyes, actually. It was a great book. Very sad story with a lot of happiness in it, if that makes any sense. It's a life story. But the sister who keeps bees has a very similar approach to talking about bees that I was raised on with my dad, because he would actually talk about the bees, but he would talk about scripture through the bees, or he would talk about life through the bees, that sort of thing. And so it's a fascinating approach. And so if you just love listening to people talk about the bees, and life lessons are exciting to you, Secret Life of Bees is a good one. You won't learn about how to be a beekeeper, but you definitely hear some pretty fascinating stuff. That being said, guys, moral of the story today is that the Super DFM+P801 that we are now using is phenomenal stuff. We've actually seen a marked increase in what we believe is the survivability of our own bees. We feel far more successful this season that we've been using this Super DFM than we have ever felt in the past. And that's not to say that, all of a sudden now we're super beekeepers. No, we've been really good beekeepers before. But the struggle is real. These pesticides are real. People not paying attention to what they're doing is real. So, finally we've got some organic help that comes along, more organic help that comes along. And it's really exciting. And we've noticed marked success with it. And we're really looking forward to getting into this season. The beauty of it is, because it's completely natural, we can use this season long, and it's certified completely safe, harmless to the honey. And so that's really exciting. So there it is. I wanted to know, and I did some research. Okay, sorry. Addison was just letting me know that she was warming her car up and she's about to head on over to the house. So 2 articles here. Again, the website, if you guys are interested in reading it directly, the website is strongmicrobials.com. Again, I'll put it in there. Just click on the one for bees if you're interested in specifically that one. If you happen to do farming of any sort, if you're a homesteader or anything like that, and you're interested in microbials for whatever it is that you are raising, whatever livestock it is, go check this website out, because I mean, like, seriously, it's fascinating. By the way, guys, I'm doing this completely on my own. I doubt anybody at this company has ever even heard my name, and that's fine. They have a great product, and I'm perfectly content talking about it and advertising for it. All right. Completely safe to use even during the honey flow. And they've been testing this stuff since 2017, so 4 years now they've been going at it. Approved for organic production. Only FDA approved ingredients inside in this product. Okay, so just super exciting stuff. Let's see. Hive weight. They have a chart here just real quick before I sign off and call it a day. University of Florida field trial results. Hive weight in their negative control. So basically the colonies in which they did not use this product had 35.5 average pounds of average weight with the negative control. But with the Super DFM, with the +P801, they were getting in excess of 39 pounds. So there's a marked increase in production as well. Let's face it, guys. Our whole motto is strong bees. Like, there's something that you want to succeed at doing when it comes to beekeeping. So you want to produce more honey. Cool. You need strong hives. You got to have strong bees. You want your bees to survive. Cool. You got to have strong bees. Literally everything you want to accomplish, you're going to do so through strong bees. So, this product's just been amazing. We've really been enjoying it. It's not so fun to apply on a cold day, but that doesn't have anything to do with the product. It has to do with getting your ass stung. That's not fun, but whatever. Decreased colony mortality in third-party field trials. Colonies treated with Super DFM showed a significant improvement in hive weight compared to that of the control colonies. So, this stuff is no joke. Every batch is, this is quality assurance. Every batch is tested, guaranteed to contain over 10 billion CFUs, which is colony-forming units of the lactic acid bacteria per serving. So there it is. I enjoyed that. A couple other books, real quick. Better Beekeeping. Last week, I also know that the camera reverses this, and so everything looks backwards. Just look at your screen through a mirror. You'll be fine. Better Beekeeping. Kim Flodham. That's what we went through the last time I did a video. Chapter 5, I think it was. Did some pictures in there. I may find something else in here that is pretty interesting to you, and we'll do a video on that. The next time I do a video should actually be, it'll be next week. We have to build a ton of frames. We have to get ready for spring. So we've got some supers, the boxes here in the back that you see. We got to fill those up with frames. Not necessarily with foundation wax yet, because we don't want the foundation to sit there and not be used. It'll start to warp and fold and all that kind of stuff. So we want to make sure that we don't put that foundation wax in until we're getting ready to take them directly to the beehives. No. All right. So we got some physical work that we need to start doing, and so it'll be different than just me sitting at my kitchen table now. Now we're getting ready for spring. By the way, that reminds me, I think in one of my previous videos I talked about, I think maybe even in the last video or the one before that, I talked about having passed these winter solstice, and the queen had started laying her eggs. And I was wrong. She hasn't, maybe a little bit, and that would only be in some of the colonies. That wouldn't be in all of the colonies. It's actually around February, later February actually, that she excuse me. I'm at the house by myself, and you know, so I'm definitely socially distant from everybody. Of course, anybody who knows me knows how much I love social distancing. But you know, I might have caught the COVID off of my phone or something. That little bitty cough there, I'm probably going to die now. So that'll be fun. Anyway, what was I talking about? Because it's gone. It's so exciting to have my mind. It really is. Stuff just disappears when I need it the most. I have no idea what I was talking about. So anyway, I'll go back to talking about these books. So I'll look in this Better Beekeeping. That's really basically just, you know, building your beekeeping into a business. So there's really not that much in here that we will be. That's what it was, is that it's not going to necessarily be me sitting at my kitchen table. We were talking about the physical work that needs to get done. We got to get those frames built up and put out. We've got all of our supers built. We are going to go buy some more in the next couple of weeks. We'll go pick up some more product and build those. But those are going to be medium supers to these deep. So it'll be about half of one of those boxes. And those are going to be our honey supers. So we got a lot of work that's going to be done. And I'm trying to think of a couple of different ways to approach that. While we're working, it's going to be my dad and I hanging out. And I always love that. He says he always loves that. And we just kind of chit-chat. We talk about what's going on with the bees, what's been going on with the bees, what we would like to be doing moving forward, that sort of stuff, and talk about other things too. So I'm thinking if he's on board with it, I may turn the camera on for that, record it. I'll record that. That won't be live. I mean, y'all see how much trouble I have in these live videos keeping my mouth in check. No, forget about it. I'm not going to do that whole conversation live. So I may need to edit for content, take out some of my language, or some of the stuff that's a little bit, because I mean, it's my dad and me, and so some of that stuff may be a little bit more personal than I'd care to share with you. And so, you know, we'll do a recording of that. We may post that. I don't know. Maybe we'll just after the fact, you know, because I've done this before too. I just turn the camera on when it's just me, and we talk for a little bit about what we did for that day. A couple of different approaches that we could do, but that's coming up next week. That being said, I'm gonna go ahead and sign off. I'm gonna get this posted to YouTube, and I will repost it to Facebook. I encourage you, please, to share. If you have found anything interesting whatsoever in what we've discussed today, I encourage you to share. I think today's been a lot of good information, even if you didn't really enjoy the way I presented it. It's a lot of good information about pesticides and research into what can be done in ways that you can help, and steps that we are taking as beekeepers to make sure that the product that we're trying to farm for you is safe and healthy and delicious and all things amazing. Every now and then I'll come across somebody that says, you know, I don't really like honey. I guess it takes all kinds, but y'all are weird if you don't like honey. I don't know what's wrong with you. But for those of you that do like honey, we are doing everything we can to make sure that our product is safe and delicious. We do not, by the way, do pollinating services. We actually try to keep now we might put our bees near a monofloral source, but that's honestly completely by accident. most of the time, especially if it's one of those highly sprayed, highly pesticide, high pesticide content, whatever. Once we realize that that's nearby within a 2-mile radius of our house, we're going to, thank that homeowner for allowing us to use that property, but we're going to pack them up and move them somewhere else because we're not interested in the pollinating services. If they get that as part of their diet, that's fine, but we're looking for a multifloral diet for our bees. So most of the time you're going to find wildflower. Now sourwood is a great honey, so there has to be some sort of like 80% content. So 80% of the honey is of that honey from that hive is sourwood, and so that's sourwood honey. And then the other 20% comes from other sources. But because the vast majority of it is sourwood, then it constitutes being a sourwood honey. And so that kind of stuff will happen. Yeah, absolutely. But we're not taking it to corn. We're not taking it to apples or something like that. Okay. But the honey is delicious. And locust is another one that we really like. So wherever the honey is, or wherever the flow is, we're going to try to get our bees as close to that as possible. And we're going to just try to produce the crud out of honey this season so that we will have plenty. I will let you know for those of you who are interested. Now, guys, for those of you that don't live in the Louisville area, I love you, but I'm not comfortable shipping it. You've got local beekeepers in your area. I know that you love me. I know that we're friends or family or both. And I know that you want to try to support me. Support me by supporting that local beekeeper. Find out who they are. You can reach out to your county extension. There are, offices at the government that you can talk to. You can find out. Make a post on Facebook. Hey guys, anybody in my area that does beekeeping? For those of you who know people in your area that do beekeeping, feel free to list their names in the comments here. So if you're in that area, you can actually see that there is a beekeeper that you can reach out to. Reach out to your local beekeepers. Buy your honey local. I've got plenty of people in my area, in the Louisville, Kentucky, Pekin, Indiana area. I got plenty of folks that want to buy my honey. So we're going to be fine, okay? Find a local beekeeper and support him or her, because that's the best way to combat this colony loss. That honestly is, I think, on the downside. I think this is a personal opinion. I have nothing to back it up other than my own perceptions, but I think we're moving away from that. The more aware that people are about the threats to bees, I think the better our chances are of combating it. The government, as with anything else, isn't really going to be of much assistance. They usually can only come in and screw things up. For those of you who doubt me, go hang out at the DMV for a little bit. You don't even need to do something. Just go sit in one of the chairs and watch how inefficient that crap is. All right, so that's, the government's not going to do it. You are. We are. Anyway, so I'll get this shared from YouTube. Please share it. If you have not already, please go to my YouTube page, Buzzin' Blossom's Bee Farm, and subscribe to my channel. If you have subscribed, encourage others. If you're enjoying the content, if you're not enjoying the content, let me know what sucks about it so that I can modify it. I ask that every time I do a video. I want to make this content appealing for you. I mean, I keep seeing a bunch of the same names pop across the screen, but I'd love to start seeing some new names too. So help me do more or do better as far as content is concerned for you. Okay. Send me an email, make comments right here. If you got negative comments, I'd rather you send those to me in email, because honestly, if I don't like what you said, I'm probably just going to delete it because, screw you. But if you send it to me in email, I'm going to be much more likely to pay attention to what it is you have to say. If you just challenge me in public because you want to be a jackass, well then, okay, cool, delete. I can do that too. But anyway, I want to know what you think. Okay, so reach out to me. You can obviously get a hold of me on Facebook. You can send me messages that way. If you've got my cell phone number, send me a text. I've gotten a couple of those in the past, and I'll be more than happy to respond to them. All right, Buzzin' Blossom's Bee Farm. That's where you want to go for YouTube to get onto my channel. Subscribe, like it, hit the little bell so that you can get notified when I put new content out. And otherwise, we shall talk soon, guys. Thanks for logging in. Thanks for listening. And thanks for your interest. All right. See ya.